No, I don't feel that, because my childhood years they might have been solitary, but they were not as painful, I think, as Michel's might be, or as he has talked about. My life was very full. I was a very active child in terms of reading. I loved books. I lost myself in books. I loved films. I saw every movie, and I loved watching television, and I loved listening to music, and I was writing my own books at 5 and 6 and 7, and then I was drawing comic books and graphic novels, and I wrote my first novel at 13 or 14. I was an active kid. I was also playing piano and guitar, and but I was solitary. I was a very solitary child. And really, if I had to look at a main trauma of my childhood, was that my father had checked out. Father wasn't around. Didn't really like the son that he had. Wanted a different son. And that was something I recognized. I noticed it. I felt it at a very young age, that I was not the son my father wanted. My father wanted the big, all-American, sports-loving, kid, not the introvert who's sitting in a corner reading, a paperback, but he wanted like an athlete, and he wanted a real manly man kind of son, and I just wasn't that. So if I had to, otherwise, the older I get and I look at my childhood, I feel somewhat privileged. It was a privileged childhood. But there was that key thing missing, and that is that a boy needs his father. And I recognize that more and more the older I get, how important that relationship is for the development of the son. Yeah. Because the people I know, the boys I know, the men I know who had lousy, terrible relationships with their father are far more of a mess than the guys I know who had really good relationships with their father and still have good relationships with their father. I know I still have damages that I still carry with me because I did not have a father, and it's taken years to try to move through them and mend them somehow, But that's but my childhood and the older I get, I think was nowhere near Michel's.
So did you bury it, or did you deal with it?
I wrote about it. That's how I deal with everything.
Yeah.
I write about it. And when I resented my father so much. I mean, it bordered on hatred at times. I just couldn't believe that he would treat his family the way he did. I just thought he had an opportunity to, well, who knows? Maybe he ultimately just didn't want to be a dad.
Is he alive?
No, he died very young. He died in 1992, actually. And basically he did not take very good care of himself. And so he died quite young. He died at 50. And anyway, so how I dealt with it, and I hadn't spoken to him for a year before he died. I had not spoken to my father for a year before it. I couldn't stand him. I was so angry with him. He was just such a prick. A very angry guy, an alcoholic. You want the list? It's the typical list.
Yeah.
And so, and then having him die without having some kind of, talk, a final confrontation of some kind was so frustrating. And I found myself writing a book that was kind of about him. It was my Stephen King novel, my Stephen King homage. It was a haunted house book called Lunar Park. It was about a man, very much like me, haunted by his father, haunted by his father's ghost. And in the end of the book, and this is not a spoiler, you can read the book and there are still plenty of surprises, but in the end of the book, he forgives his father. The character forgives his father. And I remember writing those pages. I was staying at my mother's house in Los Angeles, finishing up the book, in my childhood room. And I remember writing those pages, and I felt it all go away. I felt everything lift off me in those final pages where the character, my narrator, forgives his father. I couldn't believe the experience. I will never forget that experience. And not only that, through that forgiveness, I completely understood him. I understood him in a way that my anger never let me. I understood that his own unhappiness and disappointments in his life, and the things that had made him such an angry man and had driven him to alcoholism, and his parents. And, you know, it just was, I have nothing but sympathy and love for my father now. And and that came through writing. It simply came through writing about him. And that's how I work through pain. I've tried to be in therapy before. I tried therapy a couple of times when I was depressed or angry about my father and didn't know what else to do. And, that really never worked. It never worked. It was a waste of time. I had to process it on my own, and a therapist never, ever helped me with that. I'm talking about maybe 2 or 3 over a lifetime. I'm not talking, I wasn't obsessed with therapy. I wasn't going to therapy all the time. But there were low moments in my life, and some of them were caused by my dad and his anger, the way he treated my mother, the way he treated me, that were just almost unbearable, and something had to be done about them. I mean, look, your parents are a big part of your life. And if one of them is terrible, it's something, and if you're young, you have to deal with it.
Why do you think we seek like therapy and external sources to sort out our own problems? Is it something coming with age, that we're getting better to think about stuff, getting distance to stuff, and like this exercise of forgiveness is really one of the most difficult things in life?
Well, writing for me has made me understand my life, has made me solve problems in my life.